In the glittering world of Manhattan's elite, where champagne flows like water and scandals are currency, one young man's cruel game would destroy an innocent woman's life. But when truth collides with power, and love emerges from the ashes of betrayal, the question remains, can justice prevail when the system is rigged from the start? This is the story of Isabella Martinez and the millionaire's son who tried to break her. The gilded cage. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Hamilton mansion, casting golden rays across the imported Italian marble floors. Isabella Martinez moved silently through the grand foyer, her worn sneakers making no sound as she carried her cleaning supplies toward the East Wing. At 23, she had learned to make herself invisible in this world of obscene wealth, a skill that had served her well during her 2 years working for the Hamilton family. The mansion sprawled across 5 acres in the heart of the Hamptons, a monument to excess that never failed to make Isabella's breath catch. 18 bedrooms, 12 bathrooms, an indoor pool, a wine cellar that could stock a restaurant, and a garage housing 12 luxury vehicles. The annual property tax alone could have fed her entire neighborhood in the Bronx for a decade. But Isabella didn't resent the Hamiltons. Not really. This job, secured through her cousin Maria's connection to the estate manager, paid better than anything else she could have hoped for with just her high school diploma. The money she sent home each month kept her mother's medications flowing and her younger brother in community college. That was worth swallowing her pride, worth the aching feet and chemical burn hands, worth even the occasional condescending remark from Mrs. Hamilton about the help. "Good morning, Isabella." She turned to find Victoria Hamilton descending the grand staircase, already impeccably dressed in a cream Chanel suit despite the early hour. At 52, Mrs. Hamilton maintained her appearance with the fervor of a general planning a military campaign. Her blonde hair was perfectly coiffed, her makeup flawless, her jewelry understated but clearly expensive. "Good morning, Mrs. Hamilton," Isabella replied, lowering her eyes respectfully. "The senator and his wife will be joining us for dinner tonight. I need the formal dining room absolutely spotless. Use the good china, the limages set, not the everyday Wedgwood. And make sure those windows are streak-free. Last time, I could see fingerprints." "Of course, Mrs. Hamilton. I'll take care of it personally." Victoria nodded, already turning away, her phone pressed to her ear as she launched into a conversation about her upcoming charity gala. Isabella watched her go, then hefted her supply caddy and headed toward the dining room. The truth was, despite the demanding nature of the work, Isabella found a strange peace in the routine. There was something meditative about transforming chaos into order, grime into gleaming perfection. And the mansion, for all its ostentatious wealth, had corners of genuine beauty. The library with its mahogany shelves and leather-bound first editions, the conservatory where orchids bloomed in riotous color, the music room with its Steinway grand piano that no one ever played. She was buffing the dining room table to a mirror shine when she heard the front door slam with enough force to rattle the chandelier above her head. The voice carried through the mansion, young and male and vibrating with rage. "You can't just cut me off like some deadbeat." Isabella froze, her cloth hovering over the mahogany surface. She'd been working for the Hamiltons for 2 years, but she'd rarely seen their son. Ethan Hamilton was 25, a fixture in the society pages and gossip blogs, photographed at nightclubs with models and socialites, always with a drink in his hand and that trademark smirk on his face. He spent most of his time in the city, in the penthouse apartment his father had bought him, only returning to the family estate when absolutely necessary. "Lower your voice, Ethan." That was Richard Hamilton, the patriarch, his tone cold enough to frost glass. "And show some respect in this house." "Respect? You want to talk about respect? You're cutting my monthly allowance by half because of some trumped-up charges. I didn't even do half the things those lying." "Enough." Richard's voice cracked like a whip. "You crashed a Maserati into a storefront while driving under the influence. You're facing a lawsuit from 3 different women who claim you assaulted them at various nightclubs. The PR firm I hired to clean up your mess has billed me over $200,000 this quarter alone. And that doesn't even touch the scandal at your last job. Yes, Ethan. I know about the harassment allegations that forced you out of the investment firm." Isabella should have left. Should have slipped out through the servants' entrance and found somewhere else to work until the storm passed. But she was frozen, unable to move, barely breathing as the argument escalated. "Those women are gold diggers looking for a payday." Ethan shot back. "And the job thing was a misunderstanding. That analyst was flirting with me for months." "Stop!" Victoria's voice cut through the testosterone-fueled anger. "Both of you stop. The neighbors will hear." "Let them hear." Ethan's laugh was bitter. Everyone already knows I'm the family disappointment. The son who couldn't live up to the great Richard Hamilton's impossible standards. Why not give them a show? You want to talk about disappointment? Richard's voice dropped to a deadly quiet. You've had every advantage, every opportunity handed to you on a silver platter. The best schools, the best connections, a trust fund that would set up most people for life. And what have you done with it? You've embarrassed this family at every turn, squandered your potential on booze and parties, and God knows what else. At least I'm living my life instead of being a robot in a suit. Living your life? Is that what you call it? You're 25 years old with no career, no direction, no purpose beyond your next high. I'm done enabling your self-destruction, Ethan. The monthly allowance is cut in half, effective immediately. You want more money? Get a job. A real one, not some board position I arrange for you. The silence that followed was heavy with menace. When Ethan finally spoke, his voice was silk over steel. You're going to regret this, Dad. I promise you that. Is that a threat? It's a fact. You think you can control me with money? I'll show you exactly what happens when you try to put Ethan Hamilton in a cage. Isabella heard footsteps, rapid, angry, heading toward the back of the house. She quickly gathered her supplies and ducked into the butler's pantry just as Ethan stormed past. His face flushed with rage, his hands clenched into fists. She waited, heart pounding, until the sounds of the argument faded. Then she slowly emerged, returning to her work with shaking hands. The Hamilton family drama wasn't her business. She was just the maid, invisible and inconsequential. If only she'd known how wrong she was. If only she'd known that Ethan Hamilton had seen her that day, had filed away her presence in his mind like a chess player noting the position of pawns on a board. If only she'd known that 3 weeks later, her entire life would implode. Trap. The party was in full swing by the time Isabella arrived for her shift. The Hamiltons were hosting their annual summer gala, and the mansion was transformed into something from a fairy tale or a nightmare, depending on your perspective. White tents dotted the back lawn, strung with thousands of twinkling lights. A full orchestra played on a raised platform, their music drifting across manicured gardens where servers in crisp uniforms circulated with trays of champagne and caviar. Isabella had been hired on for the evening along with a dozen other staff members to ensure everything ran smoothly. She'd been assigned to monitor the upstairs bathrooms, restocking supplies and ensuring the powder rooms remained pristine as guests came and went. She'd seen Ethan from a distance several times during the evening. He worked the crowd with practiced ease, all charm and perfect smiles, the dutiful son playing his role. No one would have guessed that beneath the tailored tuxedo and expensive haircut lurked the same man who'd screamed at his father 3 weeks ago. It was almost midnight when Isabella slipped into the master bedroom to retrieve fresh towels from the adjoining bathroom. The room was off limits to guests, but someone had apparently ignored the discreet private sign on the door, because the bed was mussed and an empty champagne bottle lay on its side on the nightstand. She sighed, setting down her supplies to tidy the space. She was smoothing the bedspread when she heard the door open behind her. Well, look what we have here. Isabella spun around to find Ethan Hamilton leaning against the doorframe, a crystal tumbler of amber liquid in his hand. His bow tie was undone, hanging loose around his collar, and his eyes had that glassy sheen that spoke of too much alcohol. Mr. Hamilton, she said quickly, professionally. I apologize. I was just tidying up. Someone left the room in disarray. Did they? He pushed off the frame and sauntered into the room, kicking the door closed behind him with his heel. How terrible. My parents would be mortified. Something in his tone made Isabella's skin prickle with unease. She took a subtle step back, positioning herself closer to the second door that led to the bathroom and, beyond it, the hallway. I'll just finish up and get out of your way, sir. Sir. Ethan laughed, but there was no humor in it. So formal. We're practically the same age, Isabella. You don't need to sir me. The fact that he knew her name shouldn't have surprised her. She'd been working for his family for 2 years, but somehow it did. She thought she'd succeeded in remaining invisible. I really should get back to work, Mr. Hamilton. The guests can wait. He took another step closer, and now Isabella could smell the whiskey on his breath, see the strange intensity in his blue eyes. I've been watching you, all evening. Actually, I've been watching you for a while now. Did you know that? I'm not sure what you mean. You're different from the others, he continued as if she hadn't spoken. The other maids are either middle-aged women who've given up on life or young girls trying to work their way through beauty school. But you've got something. Intelligence. Pride. You think you're better than this, don't you? Better than scrubbing my family's toilets? Isabella's jaw tightened. I think I'm a hard worker doing an honest job. Now if you'll excuse me. She tried to move past him, but Ethan's hand shot out, gripping her arm. Not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to stop her. I'm not done talking to you. Let me go. Isabella's voice was steady despite the fear beginning to coil in her stomach. Let me go right now, or I'll scream. And who do you think they'll believe? Ethan's smile was cruel. The son of Richard Hamilton, or the maid from the Bronx? Come on, Isabella. You're smarter than that. He was right, and they both knew it. Isabella's mind raced, calculating her options. The bathroom door was too far away. She could scream, but with the music and conversation from the party floating up through the windows, would anyone even hear? What do you want? She asked quietly. Want? Ethan's grip loosened slightly, his thumb absently stroking the inside of her wrist. I want a lot of things. I want my father to stop treating me like a child. I want the freedom to live my life without constant judgment. I want people to stop underestimating me. He leaned in closer, and Isabella could see the calculation behind the drunken facade. This wasn't just alcohol talking, this was something colder, more deliberate. But right now, what I want is for you to understand something. You're a pawn, Isabella. Just like everyone else in this house, in this town, in my life. And pawns are useful things when you know how to move them. Before Isabella could respond, before she could even process what he meant, Ethan released her arm and stepped back. He drained his glass in one swallow, then hurled it against the wall where it shattered into 1,000 glittering shards. Oops, he said, his smile widening. Looks like you've got some cleaning up to do. He walked out, leaving the door open behind him. Isabella stood frozen for a long moment, her heart hammering against her ribs. Then, with shaking hands, she knelt to pick up the broken glass. She should have quit right then, should have walked out and never looked back. But she needed this job. Her mother needed this job. Her brother needed this job. So she cleaned up the glass, straightened the room, and went back to work. 3 days later, Victoria Hamilton's diamond necklace, a 19th century piece worth over $2 million, went missing from her bedroom safe. And Ethan Hamilton told his mother he'd seen Isabella coming out of the master bedroom the night of the party, acting suspicious. The accusation. The police arrived at 6 in the morning, just as Isabella was boarding the train from the Bronx to the Hamptons for her shift. She was scrolling through her phone, half asleep, when she felt a hand on her shoulder. Isabella Martinez? She looked up to find 2 NYPD officers standing over her, their expressions professionally blank. Around them, other passengers were craning their necks, curious and judging in equal measure. Yes. Her voice came out smaller than she'd intended. You need to come with us. We have some questions about a theft. The world tilted. I don't understand. Ma'am, we can do this quietly and calmly, or we can make a scene. It's your choice. Isabella stood on numb legs, aware of every eye on her, every whispered assumption. Criminal. Thief. I knew she looked suspicious. The trip to the station was a blur. They didn't cuff her, small mercies. But they didn't explain anything either. It wasn't until she was sitting in a stark interrogation room, the fluorescent lights humming overhead, that she finally got answers. Mrs. Victoria Hamilton reported a theft 3 days ago, Detective Morrison said, sliding a folder across the table. A diamond necklace, early 1800s, valued at $2.3 million. It was taken from the safe in her bedroom sometime during or after their summer gala. I don't know anything about a necklace, Isabella said, her hands twisted together in her lap. I would never. You were working that night, correct? Yes, but I didn't go into Mrs. Hamilton's bedroom. That area was off limits to staff. Funny thing about that. Detective Chen, Morrison's partner, opened the folder and pulled out a printed photograph. We pulled security footage from the mansion. And guess what? You were caught on camera entering the master bedroom at 11:47 p.m. Isabella's stomach dropped. Yes, but I can explain. Someone had left the room messy. I went in to clean it up. I was only there for a few minutes. Long enough to access the safe? I didn't even know where the safe was. I was just straightening the bed and… She stopped, the memory hitting her like a physical blow. Ethan. The broken glass. The way he'd looked at her like she was a chess piece he just moved into position. What is it? Morrison leaned forward. You just thought of something. Ethan Hamilton was in the room with me, Isabella said quickly. He came in while I was cleaning. He was drunk, and he made me uncomfortable. He threw a glass against the wall and left. I cleaned it up and went back to work. The detectives exchanged a glance. Did anyone else see this interaction? Chen asked. I know. The guests were all downstairs or outside. So your story is that the millionaire's son, who has lived in that house his entire life, came into his own parents' bedroom while you, the maid, just happened to be there, and he, what, harassed you? And then just left. Yes. Isabella heard the desperation in her own voice and hated it. I know how it sounds, but that's what happened. Morrison pulled out another photograph. This one showed a bank statement. This is your account, correct? Savings account at Chase Bank? Isabella nodded slowly, dread pooling in her stomach. 3 days ago, there was a deposit of $50,000. Cash. Want to explain where that money came from? The room spun. That's impossible. I don't have $50,000. I've never had $50,000. The deposit slip was filled out in your name at a branch in Manhattan. The teller remembers you, young Hispanic woman, around your age and description, wearing a Hamilton Estate employee jacket. Someone is framing me. Isabella's voice cracked. Please, you have to believe me. I don't know where that money came from. I didn't steal any necklace. I would never. Here's what I think happened. Chen interrupted, her voice almost gentle. I think you've been working for this wealthy family for 2 years, watching them spend more on a single dinner party than you make in a year. I think you saw an opportunity during the chaos of the gala. Maybe you knew the combination to the safe. Or maybe you got lucky. Either way, you took the necklace, fenced it for a fraction of its value, and thought you'd gotten away with it. No. Tears streamed down Isabella's face now. No, that's not what happened. I'm being set up. Please, you have to investigate Ethan Hamilton. He was there. He was acting strange. Ems Martinez, Morrison said, his tone final. Ethan Hamilton is the one who reported seeing you acting suspiciously that night. He's the one who told his mother to check the safe. Why would he do that if he was involved? Because he wanted to destroy her. Because his father had humiliated him, cut his allowance, and Ethan needed to prove he still had power. Because she was convenient, expendable, the perfect scapegoat. But Isabella couldn't say any of that. Not without sounding paranoid. Not without sounding exactly like what they already thought she was. A desperate woman trying to shift blame. I want a lawyer, she whispered. That's your right, Morrison said, standing. In the meantime, you're under arrest for grand larceny. You have the right to remain silent. The words washed over her like white noise. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. Just yesterday, her biggest worry had been whether her mother's insurance would cover the new medication her doctor recommended. Now she was being arrested for a crime she didn't commit, facing years in prison, her entire life imploding around her. Through the haze of shock, one thought crystallized with perfect clarity. Ethan Hamilton had done this, and somehow, someway, she would prove it. THE system fails. The public defender assigned to Isabella's case was a tired woman named Jennifer Kowalski, who handled approximately 200 cases at any given time and whose cynicism was worn like armor. I'm going to be straight with you, Jennifer said during their first meeting at the detention center where Isabella was being held pending bail. This case is bad, really bad. The evidence against you is substantial: security footage, bank records, witness testimony. The Hamiltons are a powerful family with unlimited resources, and you're a maid with no alibi and no plausible explanation for $50,000 in cash suddenly appearing in your account. Isabella sat across from her, still wearing the orange jumpsuit they'd given her, her wrists raw from where the cuffs had rubbed during processing. She hadn't slept, couldn't eat. The world had taken on a surreal, nightmarish quality. I didn't do it, she said for the 1,000th time. Someone planted that money. Someone is framing me. Oh. And why? Ethan Hamilton. I told the police. He came into the bedroom while I was there. He was acting strange. 3 weeks before the gala, I overheard him arguing with his father. Mr. Hamilton cut his allowance. Ethan threatened him, said he'd regret it. Jennifer made notes on her legal pad, but her expression remained skeptical. Okay, let's play this out. You're suggesting that Ethan Hamilton, who stands to inherit hundreds of millions of dollars, stole his own mother's necklace and framed you for it. Why? Out of spite toward his father. That seems like an elaborate and risky plan for what amounts to a petty family squabble. You don't understand. Isabella leaned forward urgently. He's not right. There's something cold in him, something cruel. When he grabbed me in that bedroom, the way he looked at me, he wanted to hurt someone, to prove he had power. And I was convenient. Did he assault you? Because if there was sexual assault, that changes things. No. He grabbed my arm, made some threatening statements, then threw a glass and left. But it was the way he did it, like he was testing me, like he was seeing how I'd react. Jennifer sighed, setting down her pen. Isabella, I want to help you. I do. But he gave me a bad feeling. isn't a defense strategy. We need concrete evidence. Do you have anyone who can corroborate your story about the argument you overheard? No. I was alone in the dining room. What about the interaction in the bedroom? No one else was there. Have you noticed Ethan Hamilton taking any particular interest in you before that night? Any pattern of harassment or inappropriate behavior? No. I barely ever saw him. He was usually in the city. Jennifer's expression said it all. This wasn't a case she could win. This was a plea bargain waiting to happen. What about the bank deposit? Isabella pressed. Can't you prove I wasn't there? Get the security footage from the bank? We requested it. The footage from that day was corrupted, according to the bank's security system. Convenient, right? But it happens more often than you'd think. Of course it was corrupted, because Ethan Hamilton had money and connections and probably knew exactly how to make evidence disappear. Your bail hearing is tomorrow, Jennifer continued. Given the value of the stolen item and your theoretical flight risk, the prosecutor is asking for $500,000. There's no way you can post that, correct? I don't have $500,000. I don't have $5,000. I barely have $500. So you'll stay in detention until the trial, which, given the court's backlog, could be 6 to 8 months. 6 to 8 months in jail for a crime she didn't commit. What about my job? Isabella asked, even though she already knew the answer. The Hamiltons terminated your employment, and between you and me, no one else is going to hire you with these charges pending. Your best bet is to consider a plea deal. If you plead guilty, the prosecutor might offer time served plus probation instead of. I'm not pleading guilty to something I didn't do. Then you're looking at trial. And if you lose, when you lose, Isabella, because that's the reality here, you're facing 7 to 15 years in state prison. The number hit like a physical blow. 15 years. She'd be 38 when she got out. Her mother would be gone. Her brother would have finished school, started a career, maybe started a family, all without her. Her entire youth, stolen. There has to be another way, Isabella whispered. Jennifer reached across the table and squeezed her hand. A brief moment of human connection. Sometimes the system fails people, especially people without money or power. I'm sorry. I truly am. But I need you to understand what you're up against. That night, lying on the thin mattress in her cell, listening to the sounds of women crying and guards shouting and metal doors clanging, Isabella made a decision. She wouldn't plead guilty. She wouldn't make it easy for Ethan Hamilton to destroy her life. If the system wouldn't help her, she'd find another way. She just had no idea what that way could possibly be. An unexpected ally. The bail hearing was exactly as terrible as Jennifer had predicted. The prosecutor painted Isabella as a calculating thief who'd betrayed her employer's trust. Ethan Hamilton himself took the stand, looking somber and regretful in a dark suit, describing how he'd seen Isabella acting furtive and nervous near his parents' bedroom. I didn't think much of it at the time, he said, his voice heavy with false remorse. I assumed she was just working. But when my mother discovered the necklace was missing, I felt it was my duty to come forward with what I'd witnessed. Isabella watched him lie with the ease of someone who'd been doing it his entire life, and she wanted to scream. But she stayed silent, her hands clenched in her lap, as the judge set bail at $750,000 and remanded her back to custody. She was being led out of the courtroom, back to the detention center, when someone called her name. Ems Martinez? Isabella Martinez? She turned to find a man approaching, maybe early 30s, with dark hair and sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He wore an expensive suit but carried himself with none of the arrogance she'd come to associate with wealthy men. Who are you? Jennifer stepped in front of Isabella protectively. My name is David Chen. I'm an investigative journalist with the New York Times. He pulled out a business card and handed it to Jennifer, then another to Isabella. I've been following the Hamilton family for a while now, and something about this case doesn't add up. We have no comment, Jennifer said automatically. Wait. Isabella stared at the card, then at David Chen's face. You said you've been following the Hamiltons? Why? David glanced at the guards nearby, then lowered his voice. Can we talk somewhere more private? 20 minutes later, they were in a small conference room at the detention center. David had cleared it with the facility somehow, money talks, even for journalists, and spread out a folder full of documents on the scratch table. 6 months ago, I started investigating Richard Hamilton, David began. He's positioning himself for a potential Senate run, which means his finances and business dealings are about to come under serious scrutiny. During my initial research, I found some irregularities, shell companies, offshore accounts, donations to his foundation that don't quite track. Nothing concrete enough to publish, but enough to make me keep digging. What does this have to do with Isabella? Jennifer asked. I'm getting there. 3 months ago, I interviewed several people who've worked for the Hamilton family over the years, and a pattern emerged. 5 different household employees over the past decade have been accused of theft. Every single one was fired without references, their reputations destroyed. None of them were prosecuted because the stolen items were mysteriously returned or the charges were dropped. Always after the employee signed an NDA and left quietly. Isabella's heart began to pound. Someone is systematically framing the employees? That was my working theory. But I couldn't prove it, and none of the former employees would talk to me on the record. They were too scared. David pulled out another document. Then I heard about your case, and I noticed something interesting. The timing. He slid a timeline across the table. Ethan Hamilton's trust fund has specific conditions. He receives a monthly allowance until he turns 26. That's in 3 months, at which point he gets full access to his $75 million inheritance. Unless what? Isabella leaned forward. Unless his father petitions the family court to extend the trust terms due to concerns about Ethan's ability to manage the money responsibly. Given Ethan's recent behavior, the DUI, the lawsuits, the harassment allegations, Richard Hamilton was apparently considering doing exactly that. Jennifer's eyes widened. So Ethan needed leverage against his father. Exactly. What better way to distract Richard Hamilton than a major scandal involving his household staff? Suddenly, Richard isn't thinking about Ethan's problems. He's dealing with police investigations, media inquiries, the theft of a valuable family heirloom. And when the dust settles, Ethan looks like the responsible one, the son who helped catch the thief, the reliable witness. This is all speculation, Jennifer said, but there was hope in her voice for the first time. It is, David admitted, which is why I need your help, Isabella. I need you to tell me everything you know about Ethan Hamilton, every interaction, every detail, no matter how small. And I need you to trust me while I dig deeper. Because I think Ethan Hamilton is a sociopath who's gotten away with destroying people's lives for years. And I think you might be the key to finally stopping him. Isabella looked at Jennifer, who gave a small nod. Then she took a deep breath and began to talk. She told David about the argument she'd overheard, about Ethan's strange behavior in the bedroom the night of the gala, about the cold calculation she'd seen in his eyes when he grabbed her arm and called her a pawn. David took notes, asked clarifying questions, and recorded everything with her permission. When she finished, he sat back and studied her for a long moment. You know what I think? He finally said. I think Ethan Hamilton made a mistake when he chose you. He thought you'd be easy to break. A poor immigrant girl with no resources, no connections, no way to fight back. But he didn't count on you being strong. And he didn't count on me. Can you really help me? Isabella's voice cracked on the question. Can you prove I'm innocent? I can try, but I need you to be patient. Investigating the Hamiltons is like peeling an onion. Every layer I uncover leads to another. It's going to take time. How much time? Because I'm looking at trial in 6 months. And if we can't prove my innocence by then, I know. And I'm going to work as fast as I can. In the meantime, stay strong. Don't take any plea deals. And trust that the truth has a way of coming out. After David left, Isabella sat alone in the conference room for a long moment. For the first time since her arrest, she felt something other than despair. She felt hope. It was fragile, easily crushed. But it was there, and she was going to hold onto it with everything she had. THE investigation. David Chen's investigation began with the money trail. He spent weeks tracking the $50,000 that had appeared in Isabella's account, following it backward through a maze of transactions designed to obscure its origin. He had help. A forensic accountant named Rachel who owed him a favor from a previous story, and a tech-savvy friend who worked in cybersecurity and had no love for wealthy people who thought they were above the law. Together, they slowly unraveled the thread. The money had been withdrawn from a shell corporation registered in Delaware, filtered through 2 different offshore accounts, converted to cash at a currency exchange in Manhattan, and then deposited in Isabella's account by someone wearing a Hamilton Estate employee jacket. The corporation's ownership was buried under layers of legal complexity, but Rachel was patient and thorough. After 3 weeks, she called David with a breakthrough. The shell company is owned by another shell company, which is owned by a trust, which is administered by a law firm that represents. Guess who? Richard Hamilton? Close. The law firm represents the Hamilton Family Trust. But here's the interesting part. The signature on the original corporate documents? It's not Richard's. It's Ethan's. David felt a surge of excitement. Can you prove that definitively? I can hire a handwriting expert to compare it to Ethan's known signatures. But David, that's going to be expensive. We're talking thousands of dollars. Do it. Bill me directly. The handwriting analysis took another 2 weeks. But when the report came back, it was exactly what David needed. The signature was a match. Ethan Hamilton had established the Shell Corporation 3 years ago, around the time he'd first started getting into serious trouble. Meanwhile, David's tech friend made progress on a different front. He managed to get access to the corrupted bank security footage through a contact at the bank's IT department. Turned out, the footage wasn't corrupted at all. It had been deliberately erased, but portions of it were recoverable from backup servers. The recovered footage showed a young woman in a Hamilton estate jacket depositing the cash in Isabella's account. Her face was partially obscured by sunglasses and a baseball cap, but her body type was wrong, too thin, too tall. This isn't Isabella, David told Jennifer during one of their weekly strategy sessions. This is someone else wearing an employee jacket. Someone Ethan Hamilton hired to make the deposit. Can we identify her? Working on it. But even without an ID, this helps establish reasonable doubt. We can show the jury that someone went to significant lengths to frame Isabella. Jennifer looked at the footage, then at David. You know what we still don't have? The necklace itself. Until we can prove where it actually went, all of this is just suggesting that someone set Isabella up. We can't definitively prove it was Ethan. David had been thinking about this problem for weeks. I need to talk to the other employees who were accused of theft. Get them to go on record. They won't. You said yourself they sign NDAs. People break NDAs all the time when they realize they're protecting criminals. I just need to find the right pressure point. It took him another month to track down all 5 former employees. 3 lived out of state, having fled New York after their ordeals. 2 had changed their names. All of them were initially unwilling to talk, but David was persistent. He showed them the evidence he'd gathered. He explained that Isabella was facing 15 years in prison for a crime she didn't commit. He appealed to their sense of justice, their anger at what had been done to them. One by one, they began to open up. Maria Gonzalez, accused of stealing silver candlesticks in 2018, admitted that Ethan Hamilton had cornered her in the wine cellar a week before the theft, asking inappropriate questions about her personal life. The candlesticks had turned up in a pawn shop with her fingerprints on them, even though she'd never touched them. How is that possible? David asked. I don't know, Maria said, her voice shaking even years later. But Mr. Hamilton, Ethan's father, told me if I just resigned quietly and signed the NDA, they wouldn't prosecute. I had 3 kids. I couldn't risk jail time. So I signed. Thomas Wright, accused of stealing a Rolex in 2016, had a similar story. Ethan had been particularly cruel to him, making comments about his sexuality, creating a hostile work environment. When the watch went missing, Thomas was immediately blamed. Did they have evidence? David asked. Security footage of me in the master bedroom, but I was there to change the linens. It was part of my job. Thomas's hands clenched into fists. They destroyed my reputation. I couldn't get another job in the service industry for 2 years, all because that spoiled brat wanted to flex his power. The pattern was clear. Ethan Hamilton targeted employees he perceived as vulnerable or who had somehow crossed him. He created opportunities, planted evidence, and used his family's wealth and influence to avoid consequences. But the most damning testimony came from an unexpected source. David had been trying to reach Caroline Foster, a former estate manager, for weeks. She'd been the highest-ranking employee accused of theft, blamed for the disappearance of an antique pocket watch worth $30,000. Unlike the others, Caroline had fought back, hired a lawyer, demanded a proper investigation, and then, suddenly, she dropped all charges and disappeared. David finally tracked her down in Portland, Oregon, where she'd rebuilt her life as a real estate agent. When he called, she hung up on him. When he showed up at her office, she threatened to call security. Please, David said, just give me 5 minutes. A young woman's life is at stake. Something in his voice must have reached her, because Caroline's resistance crumbled. She invited him to her home that evening, poured 2 glasses of wine, and told him a story that made his blood run cold. Ethan Hamilton didn't just frame me for theft, she said. You tried to rape me. David's pen froze over his notebook. What? 3 days before the pocket watch went missing, Ethan came to my office. He'd been drinking. He locked the door and told me he'd been watching me, that he liked how I handled myself. Then he tried to kiss me. When I pushed him away, he got violent. He pinned me against the desk and... She paused, taking a shaky breath. I fought him off, kneed him hard enough that he went down. Then I ran. Did you report it? To who? His parents. The police. I was the employee. He was the heir. No one would have believed me. So I kept my head down, avoided him, and hoped it would blow over. But it didn't. No. The pocket watch disappeared from Ethan's room. His room, not his parents'. And suddenly I was the thief. They had security footage of me going into his suite, which I did regularly as part of my job. They had my fingerprints on the watch case. And Ethan stood there, all wounded innocence, saying he couldn't believe I'd betrayed the family's trust. Why did you drop the charges? Caroline's laugh was bitter. Because Richard Hamilton offered me $200,000 and a glowing reference letter to disappear quietly. And because the alternative was a legal battle against one of the richest families in New York. Knowing that Ethan would be on the stand lying about me. Knowing they dig into every aspect of my life looking for dirt. I took the money. I'm not proud of it, but I took it. Would you be willing to testify about this now? To go public with what Ethan did and violate my NDA, I'd have to return the money, plus penalties. I'd be sued into oblivion. What if I told you that there's a legal precedent for NDAs being voided when they're used to cover up criminal activity? What if I told you that an attorney is willing to take your case pro bono? And what if I told you that you could help stop Ethan Hamilton from destroying another innocent person's life? Caroline stared into her wine glass for a long time. When she looked up, there were tears in her eyes. Tell me what you need. Confrontation. Armed with Caroline's testimony and months of investigative work, David went to see Ethan Hamilton. He called ahead, requesting an interview for a profile piece on young philanthropists in New York. Ethan's ego was too large to resist the opportunity for positive press, especially with his father's Senate run ramping up. They met at Ethan's penthouse apartment in Tribeca, a 3,000 square foot shrine to access with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Hudson River. Ethan greeted him wearing designer casual wear, a glass of scotch already in hand despite it being 11 in the morning. David Chen, Ethan said, shaking his hand with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I've read some of your work. Hard-hitting stuff. Though I'm surprised you're interested in philanthropy. Doesn't seem like your usual beat. I like to diversify, David said, taking a seat on the leather sofa. He pulled out his recorder. Do you mind? Not at all. I'm an open book. David went through the motions of a normal interview for the first 20 minutes. He asked about Ethan's charitable work, minimal and self-serving, his plans for the future, vague and grandiose, his thoughts on his father's potential political career, supportive in that carefully scripted way that revealed nothing. Then, when Ethan was relaxed and comfortable, David went for the throat. Let's talk about Isabella Martinez. The change in Ethan was instantaneous. His smile faltered for just a fraction of a second before reassembling itself. But David caught it. The maid who stole from my family? What about her? I've been investigating her case, and I've found some interesting inconsistencies. Have you? Ethan's tone was light, but his grip on his glass had tightened. Well, the police seem satisfied with their investigation. She's guilty, David. I saw her acting suspicious myself. Right. In your parents' bedroom, where you confronted her. I didn't confront her. I simply passed by and noticed her behaving strangely. That's not what you told the police initially. In your first statement, you said you went into the bedroom and spoke with her. You only changed your story later to say you'd seen her from the doorway. Ethan's eyes narrowed. I don't recall the exact details. It was a stressful situation. I'm sure it was. Just like it must have been stressful when Caroline Foster accused you of assault. The color drained from Ethan's face. That's a lie. Caroline was a disgruntled employee who tried to extort my family. Is that why your father paid her $200,000 to go away? We settled a nuisance claim. It happens all the time in wealthy families. People see an opportunity, and what about Maria Gonzalez? Thomas Wright, James Chen, no relation, Sarah M.C. Kinney, and Robert Torres? Were they all just disgruntled employees trying to extort your family? Ethan stood abruptly. I think this interview is over. 5 employees accused of theft over 10 years. David continued, not moving from the sofa. All of them had negative interactions with you shortly before valuable items went missing. All of them quietly disappeared after being paid off or threatened into silence. That's quite a pattern, Ethan. Get out of my apartment. I spoke with a forensic accountant. The $50,000 deposited in Isabella's account came from a shell corporation that you established. I have handwriting analysis proving your signature on the incorporation documents. That's circumstantial, and you know it. I have recovered security footage from the bank showing that the person who made the deposit wasn't Isabella. I have testimony from Caroline Foster about what you did to her. And I have evidence that you've been systematically framing household employees for years as a way to exercise power and control. Ethan's face had gone from pale to flushed, his hands shaking with rage. You have nothing. Theories and speculation from bitter former employees. My family will bury you in lawsuits before you can even think about publishing any of this. Maybe, David said calmly, but I don't think you can afford that scrutiny right now. Not with your father's Senate run. Not with your trust fund coming due. All I have to do is ask the questions publicly, and the media will do the rest. The court of public opinion doesn't require the same burden of proof as a legal court. What do you want? Ethan spat. Money? A story. What's your angle here? I want you to tell the truth about Isabella Martinez. I want you to admit you framed her, and I want you to turn over the necklace. Ethan laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. You're insane. Even if I had done what you're suggesting, which I didn't, why the hell would I confess? Because if you don't, I go public with everything. Your assault of Caroline Foster. The pattern of framing employees. The shell corporations. Your father's Senate campaign will be destroyed. Your family's reputation will be in tatters. And you'll spend the rest of your life fighting legal battles and dodging media questions. And if I confess what? You make all this go away? If you confess and cooperate with Isabella's defense, I'll hold the story until after her trial. I'll give your father a chance to distance himself from you, to claim ignorance of your actions. The damage to his campaign will be minimal. You'll face consequences, but they'll be manageable. Therapy, maybe some community service, probably no jail time if you have a good lawyer. You're offering me a deal? Ethan's voice dripped with contempt. You're not a prosecutor, Chen. You're just a journalist with an overinflated sense of importance. David stood, packing away his recorder. You're right. I'm not a prosecutor. But the story I publish will catch the attention of prosecutors. Real ones, who will investigate not just this case, but every suspicious incident involving your family's employees over the past decade. Is that really what you want? He walked to the door, then paused and turned back. I'm giving you 48 hours to decide, Ethan. After that, I run the story. And let me tell you something. I've spent months on this investigation. I've interviewed dozens of people. I've followed the money, recovered the evidence, built a case that's going to hold up under scrutiny. You think you're untouchable because you're rich? Because your family has power? All that means is your fall will be harder and more public. Get out. David left, his heart pounding, but his expression calm. He'd thrown down the gauntlet. Now he just had to wait to see if Ethan would pick it up. Teach breaking point. Ethan Hamilton didn't confess. Instead, he doubled down. Within 24 hours of David's visit, Ethan's lawyers filed a defamation lawsuit against him. They sent cease and desist letters to the New York Times threatening legal action if any story about Ethan ran. And they issued a press release painting David as a rogue journalist with a vendetta against successful families. But David had anticipated this. He'd cleared everything with the Times legal department before confronting Ethan. And he had one more card to play. He published the story anyway. It ran on a Sunday, the day newspapers still mattered. The headline, Millionaire's son accused of pattern of framing household employees. The article was meticulously sourced, carefully worded to avoid definitive claims that couldn't be proven. It presented the evidence, the timeline, the testimonies from former employees. It raised questions rather than making accusations. It let readers draw their own conclusions. And it went viral. Within hours, Ethan Hamilton was trending on Twitter. News outlets were picking up the story. Legal experts were being interviewed about the case. Caroline Foster agreed to go on camera for an interview with CNN, detailing her assault and the subsequent framing. Richard Hamilton's Senate campaign went into crisis mode. Campaign staff resigned. Donors pulled funding. Political allies distanced themselves. And in the detention center where Isabella had been held for 6 months awaiting trial, Jennifer Kowalski received an urgent call from the district attorney's office. They wanted to make a deal. They're offering to drop all charges, Jennifer told Isabella during an emergency meeting, in exchange for your agreement not to sue the city or the Hamilton family. Isabella stared at her lawyer in shock. Just like that. They're letting me go? The DA doesn't want this case to go to trial. Not now. Not with the media attention and the questions about the investigation. They can't prove you stole the necklace. They could barely prove it before. And now with David's reporting, the whole case looks compromised. What about Ethan? Is he being charged? Jennifer's expression turned grim. No. There's not enough evidence to charge him criminally. Everything David uncovered is circumstantial. The Shell Corporation, the pattern of accusations, none of it proves beyond a reasonable doubt that Ethan framed you specifically. That's not fair. Isabella's hands clenched into fists. He destroyed my life. He put me in here for 6 months. And he just gets away with it. Welcome to the justice system, Jennifer said bitterly. Rich people don't face the same consequences as everyone else. But Isabella, you need to think carefully about this offer. If you refuse it and demand a trial, there's still a chance you could be convicted. The jury might not believe David's reporting. They might see you as a maid who got caught and is now trying to shift blame. So I'm supposed to just walk away? Pretend none of this happened? You're supposed to accept that you're getting your life back. It's not perfect justice. It's not even close. But it's better than the alternative. Isabella wanted to scream, wanted to rage against the unfairness of it all. But 6 months in detention had taught her about pragmatism, about survival, about taking the victories you could get. I'll take the deal, she whispered. But I want one thing. What's that? I want to face Ethan Hamilton one more time. I want to look him in the eye and let him know he didn't break me. The meeting was arranged at neutral ground, a conference room at Jennifer's law office. Ethan's lawyers insisted on strict parameters. No recording devices, no press, no physical contact. Just two people in a room with their respective attorneys present. Ethan arrived 15 minutes late, looking haggard. The past week had clearly taken its toll. His eyes were bloodshot, his usually perfect hair disheveled. The confidence he'd worn like armor during David's interview had cracked. Isabella sat across from him, her back straight, her hands folded calmly on the table. 6 months in detention had stripped away any softness, any naivety. The woman who sat in that chair was harder than the maid who'd been arrested on a train platform. You wanted to see me, Ethan said, his voice flat. Here I am. I wanted you to see me, Isabella corrected. I wanted you to look at the person whose life you tried to destroy, and I wanted you to know that you failed. Ethan's jaw tightened. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. You chose me because you thought I was weak, because you thought I had no power, no resources, no way to fight back. You thought you could use me to hurt your father, to prove you still mattered. This conversation is over. Ethan started to stand. Sit down. The command in Isabella's voice surprised even her. But Ethan sat, and she continued. I spent 6 months in a cell because of you. 6 months of strip searches and terrible food and sleeping with one eye open. 6 months of my mother crying on the phone, my brother ashamed to tell his friends what happened to his sister. 6 months of hell that you put me through because of your wounded ego. You can't prove that. I don't have to prove it. We both know the truth. And you know what? The world knows it too now. David's article, Caroline's interview, everyone sees what you are. A spoiled, cruel man who hurts people because it's the only way you know how to feel powerful. Ethan's hands curled into fists on the table. You think you've won? My lawyers are going to tear apart David Chen's career. My family is going to survive this. And you? You're going to spend the rest of your life as the maid who got arrested for theft. That stain doesn't wash off, Isabella. Maybe not, Isabella agreed. But at least I can live with myself. Can you? The question hung in the air between them. For just a moment, Isabella saw something flicker in Ethan's eyes, not remorse exactly, but perhaps recognition. Recognition that he'd crossed a line he couldn't uncross, that he'd become something monstrous. Then it was gone, replaced by the cold blankness she remembered from the bedroom that night. We're done here, Ethan said, standing. Enjoy your freedom, Isabella. I'm sure it will be as empty and meaningless as you are. He walked out, his lawyer trailing behind. Jennifer put a hand on Isabella's shoulder. You okay? Yeah, Isabella said, surprised to find it was true. I'm okay. Because she'd looked into the eyes of the man who tried to break her, and she'd realized something important. Ethan Hamilton was small. For all his money and privilege and power, he was a small, scared boy who hurt people because he didn't know any other way to feel significant. And she refused to let someone that small have power over her anymore. Rebuilding. The day Isabella walked out of the detention center, she was met by a small crowd. Her mother, who'd taken 3 buses from the Bronx. Her brother Diego, who'd cut class to be there. David Chen, who'd covered every development in her case. And a handful of reporters, asking for statements. Isabella ignored the reporters and walked straight into her mother's arms. Mihija, Rosa Martinez sobbed, holding her daughter like she might disappear. My baby girl. Thank God. Thank God. I'm okay, Mama, Isabella whispered. I'm home. But home was complicated now. The Bronx apartment felt smaller than she remembered, the walls thin and the neighbors loud. She'd changed during those 6 months, become someone who didn't quite fit in the life she'd left behind. And the practical matters were daunting. She had no job, no references, no savings. The Hamilton family had made it clear through their lawyers that any attempt to sue them would be met with aggressive legal action. The settlement from the DA's office was minimal, barely enough to cover Jennifer's fees. "What am I supposed to do now?" Isabella asked David over coffee a week after her release. They'd stayed in touch, his reporting having created an unlikely bond between them. "No one's going to hire me. Every time someone Googles my name, the first thing that comes up is my arrest." "You could change your name," David suggested. "Start fresh somewhere else." "Run away, you mean?" "Let Ethan Hamilton win." "It's not about winning or losing, Isabella. It's about survival." But Isabella didn't want to just survive. She wanted to live. She wanted to matter. The answer came from an unexpected source. Caroline Foster called her 3 weeks after her release. They'd never spoken directly, but Caroline had followed Isabella's case closely, seeing echoes of her own experience in the younger woman's ordeal. "I have a proposition for you," Caroline said. "I don't know if you're interested, but hear me out." She explained that several of the former Hamilton employees, the ones who'd been framed and forced out, were forming a support group. But more than that, they wanted to create an organization to help other domestic workers who faced similar situations. Advocacy, legal support, public education about the rights of household employees. "We want to call it the Domestic Workers Defense Alliance," Caroline said. "And I'd like you to be the face of it. You're young, articulate, and your case got media attention. People know your name. We could use that." "I don't know anything about running an organization," Isabella protested. "None of us do. We'll learn. But I know something about real estate and fundraising. Maria knows about community organizing. Thomas has a background in public relations. We can figure this out together." It was terrifying. It was audacious. It was exactly what Isabella needed. Within 6 months, the DWD had secured nonprofit status, opened a small office in Queens, and started offering free legal consultations to domestic workers. Isabella became the public face of the organization, speaking at community centers and colleges, sharing her story, raising awareness about the vulnerability of household employees. She discovered she had a talent for public speaking. The fear and shame that had consumed her during the trial transformed into anger, productive anger that fueled her advocacy. She talked about the power imbalances in wealthy households, the ways domestic workers could be exploited, the importance of knowing your rights. And slowly, other workers started coming forward. Women who'd been sexually harassed by employers, men who'd been cheated out of wages, people who'd been fired without cause and threatened if they complained. The DWDA couldn't help everyone, but they helped enough people that the organization grew. Donations came in. Volunteers stepped up. They started getting media coverage, positive coverage, the kind that focused on their work rather than Isabella's past. David wrote a follow-up piece about the organization that went viral. A philanthropist donated $50,000. A labor law firm offered pro bono services. "You're making a difference," David told Isabella over dinner one evening. They'd fallen into a comfortable friendship, meeting every few weeks to catch up. "You took the worst thing that ever happened to you and turned it into something meaningful." "I had help," Isabella said. "I couldn't have done any of this without you, without Caroline, without everyone who believed me. But you're the one who chose not to give up. You could have taken this settlement money and disappeared. Instead, you're here, fighting for people who can't fight for themselves." Isabella smiled, but it was bittersweet. "I still think about him sometimes. Ethan. I wonder if he ever thinks about what he did to me." "Probably not," David said honestly. "People like Ethan don't tend toward introspection." His father lost the Senate race, though. "I saw that, by a landslide." The scandal around Ethan was too much to overcome. Richard Hamilton is effectively retired from public life now. "Good," Isabella said, and meant it. But late at night, when she was alone in the small apartment she now shared with a roommate from the DWDA, Isabella sometimes let herself feel the full weight of what she'd lost. 6 months of her life, her innocence, her faith in the justice system, the simple joy of working without fear, of moving through the world without constantly looking over her shoulder. Ethan Hamilton had taken those things from her, and no amount of advocacy work would bring them back. Still, she was building something new, something better, a life that mattered. And that, she decided, was its own form of justice, unexpected love. 9 months after her release, Isabella met Marcus Williams at a fundraiser for the DWDA. He was a civil rights attorney, tall and kind-eyed, with a quiet strength that immediately put her at ease. He'd heard about the organization through a colleague and wanted to learn more about their work. "I represented a domestic worker last year," he told Isabella over the hors d'oeuvres. Jamaican woman who'd been working for a family in Connecticut for 15 years. They fired her when she got sick, refused to pay her accrued vacation time, then threatened to report her to ICE when she tried to file a complaint. What happened? We won. Settled for 3 years of back wages and damages. But the case opened my eyes to how vulnerable these workers are. I'd like to help your organization if you'll have me. Marcus started volunteering with the DWDA, offering legal advice and taking on cases pro bono. He and Isabella worked together frequently, and she found herself looking forward to their meetings with an anticipation that had nothing to do with legal strategy. He was different from anyone she'd ever known. Patient where others were rushed, thoughtful where others were reactive. He listened more than he spoke, and when he did speak, his words carried weight. 3 months into their working relationship, Marcus asked her to dinner. Not a work dinner, he clarified quickly. An actual date, if you're interested, and if I'm not completely misreading the situation. Isabella's first instinct was to say no. She wasn't ready. She was too damaged, too complicated, too focused on the organization to have space for romance. But then she looked at Marcus's hopeful expression, and she remembered David's words. You took the worst thing that ever happened to you and turned it into something meaningful. Maybe she could do that with her heart too. Yes, she said. I'd like that. Their relationship developed slowly, carefully. Marcus knew about her past. Everyone did. But he never treated her as broken or fragile. He challenged her, supported her, made her laugh in ways she'd forgotten were possible. 6 months into dating, he met her mother and brother. Rosa Martinez took one look at Marcus and pulled Isabella aside in the kitchen. This one, she said in Spanish. This one is good. Don't let your fear push him away. I'm not afraid, Mama. Yes, you are. You're terrified. That man hurt you so badly that you think every person with money or power will do the same. But Marcus isn't Ethan Hamilton. You know that, right? Isabella did know that, but knowing it intellectually and believing it emotionally were different things. The real test came on a Saturday afternoon when Marcus invited her to his family's home in Long Island for lunch. She'd been nervous about meeting his parents. His father was a judge, his mother a doctor, both accomplished and intimidating. But when they arrived at the house, any anxiety evaporated. Marcus's parents were warm and welcoming, his younger sister funny and irreverent. They treated Isabella like she mattered, asking about her work with genuine interest, sharing stories about Marcus's childhood with obvious affection. It was during dessert that Marcus's father, Judge Williams, brought up the case. I followed your situation in the news, he said gently. What happened to you was unconscionable. I hope you know that not all judges, not all of the legal system, would have failed you the way it did. I know, Isabella said, though she wasn't entirely sure she believed it. The system is imperfect. It favors wealth and power in ways that are fundamentally unjust. But there are people within it trying to make it better. People like you, fighting for workers' rights. People like Marcus, taking on cases others won't touch. Change is slow, but it's happening. Do you really believe that? Isabella asked. After everything you've seen? I have to believe it, Judge Williams said. The alternative is despair, and despair serves no one. Later, as Marcus drove her home, Isabella was quiet. You okay? He asked, reaching for her hand. Your family is wonderful, she said, and a little terrifying. Marcus laughed. They're definitely intense, but they liked you. My sister told me to lock it down before you realized you could do better. Isabella smiled, but her expression turned serious. Marcus, I need to tell you something. About me, about my past. You don't have to. I do, because I care about you. And I need you to understand what you're getting into if this continues. She told him about the nightmares she still had sometimes, about the panic attacks in crowded spaces, about the way she sometimes struggled to trust people's intentions. She told him about the anger that lived in her chest like a stone, the way she sometimes wanted to hurt Ethan Hamilton the way he'd hurt her. I'm not broken, she finished. But I'm not the same person I was before all this happened, and I don't know if I'll ever fully trust the way I used to. Marcus listened to all of it without interrupting. When she finished, he pulled the car over and turned to face her. Isabella, what happened to you was traumatic. Of course it changed you. Of course you have scars. But you know what I see when I look at you? I see someone who survived something terrible and chose to build something beautiful from the wreckage. I see someone who fights for people who can't fight for themselves. I see someone brave and brilliant and so much stronger than she realizes. I'm afraid, Isabella whispered. I'm afraid that one day you'll realize I'm too much work, too complicated to. Stop, Marcus said gently. I'm not afraid of your trauma. I'm not afraid of your anger or your struggles or any of it. What I am afraid of is letting you push me away because you think you don't deserve to be loved." Isabella felt tears spilling down her cheeks. "How can you be so sure?" "Because I know you. I've worked beside you, watched you pour your heart into helping others, seen the way you light up when you talk about the organization's successes. I know you, Isabella, and I love what I know." It was the first time either of them had said the word love, and it hung in the air between them like a benediction. "I love you too," Isabella said, and felt something tight in her chest finally loosen. They sat in the car for a long time, holding hands, letting the truth of those words settle over them like a blanket. And for the first time since her arrest, Isabella let herself imagine a future that wasn't defined by what had been taken from her, but by what she could build. THE Reckoning. 2 years after Isabella's release, Ethan Hamilton's carefully constructed life finally collapsed. It started with another maid, a young woman named Sophia Reyes who worked for a family friend of the Hamiltons in Manhattan. Ethan had met her at a dinner party and, true to form, targeted her when he perceived her as vulnerable. But Sophia was different from Isabella. She had a boyfriend who worked in tech and who, when Sophia told him about Ethan's inappropriate behavior, set up hidden cameras in the areas where Sophia worked. The footage Sophia's boyfriend captured was damning. It showed Ethan cornering Sophia in a pantry, touching her without consent, making explicit threats about what would happen if she complained. It showed him, days later, planting a valuable ring in her bag. But unlike Isabella, Sophia didn't wait for the accusation. She went straight to the police with the video evidence. The media explosion was immediate and brutal. David Chen, who'd stayed on the Hamilton beat, broke the story. Other outlets picked it up. The hashtag #BelieveIsabella started trending as people connected the dots between Sophia's case and Isabella's ordeal. The district attorney, facing public pressure and armed with actual video evidence this time, filed charges against Ethan Hamilton, attempted theft by frame-up, criminal harassment, and assault. Isabella learned about it from David, who called her the morning the charges were announced. "Are you okay?" he asked. Isabella was in the DWDA office, surrounded by files and the constant hum of activity that had become her normal life. Marcus was in the next room, on a conference call with a client. Everything was exactly as it should be. "I don't know," she admitted. "Part of me is glad he's finally facing consequences, but another part of me is angry that it took someone else being victimized. Why wasn't my case enough?" "Because you didn't have video evidence," David said gently. "The system requires proof beyond reasonable doubt, and we couldn't provide that. It's not fair, but it's reality." Will this help Sophia's case? It should. And Isabella, the prosecutor wants to talk to you. They're building a pattern of behavior case. Your testimony could be crucial. The thought of facing Ethan Hamilton in court, of dredging up everything from 2 years ago, made Isabella's stomach churn. But she thought about Sophia, about how terrified the young woman must be, and she knew what she had to do. "I'll testify," she said. The trial was set for 6 months later. In the interim, 3 more women came forward with stories about Ethan Hamilton. One had been a server at a restaurant he frequented. Another was a former assistant at his father's company. The third was a college classmate who'd been too scared to report what happened at the time. The prosecution built a case painting Ethan as a serial predator who used his wealth and position to target vulnerable women, then systematically destroyed their credibility when they resisted. Isabella prepared for her testimony with Marcus's help. They went over every detail of that night, every interaction with Ethan, every moment of the investigation and arrest. Marcus helped her stay calm, reminded her to breathe, held her when the memories became too much. The day she took the stand, the courtroom was packed. Ethan sat at the defense table looking smaller than she remembered, his expensive suit unable to hide the defeat in his eyes. Isabella testified for 3 hours. She told the jury about overhearing the argument between Ethan and his father, about the encounter in the bedroom where Ethan had grabbed her arm and called her a pawn, about the terror of being arrested, the humiliation of detention, the 6 months of her life stolen by a man who'd never faced a consequence in his life. "Did you steal the Hamilton family necklace?" the prosecutor asked. "No, I did not." "Do you know what happened to it?" "I don't, but I believe Ethan Hamilton took it himself, or arranged for someone else to take it, in order to frame me." The defense attorney, a high-priced shark named Gerard Mills, tore into her during cross-examination. He brought up every inconsistency in her original statements. He questioned why she hadn't reported Ethan's harassment immediately. He implied she was lying to get revenge for being fired. "Isn't it true, Ems Martinez, that you resented the Hamilton family's wealth?" That you felt you deserved more than what you were being paid? I was paid fairly for my work, Isabella said calmly. And I didn't resent the Hamiltons. I was grateful for the job. But you lost that job because you were accused of theft. That must have made you angry. I was angry because I was innocent. I was angry because a man with power decided to destroy my life to score points against his father. I'm still angry, Mr. Mills. But that doesn't make me a liar. When she stepped down from the stand, Isabella's legs were shaking. But she'd done it. She'd looked Ethan Hamilton in the eye and told the truth. Sophia Reyes testified next, showing the jury the video evidence. Several jurors looked visibly disturbed watching Ethan corner the young woman, watching him plant evidence in her bag. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The jury deliberated for 2 days. And when they returned with a verdict, Isabella was in the courtroom to hear it. On the count of assault in the 3rd degree, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of attempted criminal possession of stolen property, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of witness tampering, we find the defendant guilty. 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 Ethan Hamilton was sentenced to 5 years in prison, with possibility of parole after 3. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough to balance the scales. But it was something. As the guards led Ethan out of the courtroom, he looked at Isabella one last time. She met his gaze without flinching, and she felt nothing. No triumph, no vindication, just a quiet sense of closure. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Isabella gave a brief statement thanking the prosecutor, supporting Sophia and the other women who testified, and encouraging other victims of wealthy predators to come forward. Justice may be slow, she said. Justice may be imperfect, but it's worth fighting for. Every single time. Marcus was waiting at the edge of the crowd. When she finished speaking, Isabella walked straight into his arms. "It's over," she whispered. "It's over," he confirmed. "You were incredible in there." I was terrified. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting despite it. Isabella pulled back to look at him. "Did you just quote a fortune cookie at me?" Marcus laughed. "Maybe. But it's true." They walked away from the courthouse together, leaving the reporters and the cameras and the circus behind. Isabella had spent 2 years of her life defined by what Ethan Hamilton had done to her. It was time to define herself by what she'd built in spite of him. Full circle. 3 years after the trial, Isabella Martinez stood in front of 500 people at the annual Domestic Workers Defense Alliance Gala. The organization had grown exponentially. They now had offices in 4 cities, a staff of 25, and had helped over 3,000 domestic workers navigate legal issues, workplace disputes, and immigration problems. They'd lobbied successfully for stronger labor protections and mandatory contracts for household employees in New York State. Isabella served as the executive director, a role she'd grown into with Marcus's encouragement and Caroline Foster's mentorship. She'd learned how to fundraise, how to manage staff, how to navigate the political landscape of nonprofit work. But tonight wasn't about business. Tonight was personal. 5 years ago, Isabella told the crowd, I was arrested for a crime I didn't commit. I spent 6 months in detention, facing 15 years in prison, all because I was convenient collateral damage in a wealthy man's power play. She paused, letting the weight of those words settle. The system failed me in almost every way. The police didn't investigate thoroughly. The prosecutor was more interested in a conviction than the truth. My public defender was overworked and underfunded. I had no power, no resources, no reason to hope. But I did have one thing. I had people who believed me. A journalist who saw past the surface story. Former employees who risked the legal consequences to tell their truths. And eventually, another victim who had the evidence to break the case open. Isabella's eyes found Marcus in the audience. He was sitting with her mother and brother, all 3 of them smiling at her with obvious pride. The work we do at the DWDA isn't about revenge. It's not even really about justice in the traditional sense. It's about making sure that vulnerable workers know they have value, that they have rights, that they don't have to face powerful people alone. She clicked to the next slide in her presentation, which showed statistics. Thousands of workers helped, millions of dollars in unpaid wages recovered, dozens of cases of abuse prosecuted. These numbers represent real people. Maria, who got her job back after being fired for reporting harassment. James, who recovered 3 years of unpaid overtime. Sophia, who successfully sued her employer for discrimination. Each one of them is a victory against a system that was designed to favor wealth and power over basic human dignity. The crowd applauded, but Isabella held up her hand for quiet. Tonight, I want to announce something new. Thanks to a generous grant from the Ford Foundation, The DWDA is launching a legal defense fund specifically for domestic workers facing criminal charges. We'll provide free legal representation, investigative support, and advocacy throughout the legal process. No one should have to go through what I went through. No one should have to face the justice system alone. The applause this time was thunderous. Isabella stepped back from the podium as Caroline Foster came up to present the rest of the program. After the gala, as staff and volunteers cleaned up and donors lingered over final drinks, Marcus found Isabella on the balcony overlooking Central Park. "Hell of a speech," he said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "I was nervous," Isabella admitted. "Public speaking still scares me sometimes." "You'd never know it. You commanded that room." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the lights of the city twinkle against the dark sky. "I have something for you," Marcus said, pulling back slightly. "Marcus, you already donated to the fund." "You didn't need to." "It's not a donation." He turned her around to face him, and Isabella's breath caught when she saw him drop to one knee. "Isabella Martinez, you are the strongest, bravest, most inspiring person I've ever known. You took the worst thing that ever happened to you and transformed it into a force for good in the world. You fight for people who can't fight for themselves. You never give up, never back down, never let the bastards win." He pulled out a small velvet box and opened it to reveal a simple but beautiful diamond ring. "I want to spend the rest of my life supporting you, loving you, and being perpetually awed by you. Will you marry me?" Isabella looked at the ring, then at Marcus's hopeful face, and felt tears streaming down her cheeks. 5 years ago, she'd thought her life was over. She'd thought Ethan Hamilton had destroyed everything she could be. But here she was, surrounded by people she loved, doing work that mattered, with a man who saw all of her, trauma and strength, fear and courage, and loved her not in spite of those contradictions, but because of them. "Yes," she said, pulling him to his feet. "Yes, absolutely yes." They kissed on the balcony as fireworks from a nearby celebration lit up the sky. And Isabella thought about how strange life was, how the worst moments could somehow lead to the best ones, how suffering could be transformed into purpose. She would always carry scars from what Ethan Hamilton had done to her, always flinch at certain reminders, always feel a flash of anger when she read about wealthy people escaping consequences. But she refused to let those scars define her. She was more than what had been done to her. She was what she'd built from the rubble of her old life, and she was going to spend the rest of her days making sure other people had the same chance. 5 years later, the notification popped up on Isabella's phone while she was reviewing grant applications in her office. A news alert. Ethan Hamilton released on parole after serving 3 years. She stared at the headline for a long moment, then set the phone down and returned to her work. Marcus found her an hour later, still at her desk, surrounded by papers. "Did you see the news?" he asked quietly. "I saw it." "How do you feel?" Isabella considered the question. Once, the thought of Ethan Hamilton walking free would have consumed her with rage and fear. But that was years ago, when the wounds were fresh and she still jumped at shadows. "I feel fine, actually," she said, surprised to find it was true. "He served his time. He'll be on parole for years. His family's reputation is destroyed. He'll never have the power he once had. And more importantly," Marcus said, sitting on the edge of her desk, "he's irrelevant to your life now." "Exactly." Isabella reached for her husband's hand. They'd been married for 3 years now, living in a modest apartment in Brooklyn with their rescue dog. Simple, happy, full of purpose. "You know what I was thinking about today?" Isabella continued. "That teenager who used to clean the Hamilton mansion. The one who was so scared all the time, trying to be invisible, just trying to survive. I wonder what she would think if she could see us now." "I think she'd be proud," Marcus said. "I think she'd be amazed. I think she'd be relieved," Isabella said, to know that the worst thing that could happen wasn't the end of her story, just the middle chapter. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Sophia Reyes, texting a picture of her college graduation. Sophia had used the settlement money from her lawsuit against Ethan to finish her degree. She was starting law school in the fall. "Thank you for everything," Sophia's message read. "I wouldn't be here without you." Isabella smiled and texted back congratulations. Then she returned to her grant applications, to the work that never stopped, the mission that kept expanding. Outside her office, she could hear the DWDA staff laughing about something, phones ringing, the constant hum of an organization making a difference. She'd built this. Out of pain and injustice in 6 months in a detention center, she'd built something that mattered. And no one, not Ethan Hamilton, not the system that had failed her, not anyone, could take that away. In the end, Isabella Martinez's story isn't about a millionaire's son who tried to destroy her life. It's about a woman who refused to be destroyed. It's about the power of truth, the importance of allies, and the reality that justice, though imperfect and often delayed, can still prevail. Ethan Hamilton served 3 years in prison and will spend the rest of his life dealing with the consequences of his actions. But Isabella built something that will outlast them both, an organization that gives voice to the voiceless and power to the powerless. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's living well. It's building something beautiful from the wreckage. It's becoming more than anyone, especially your abuser, ever imagined you could be. This has been the story of Isabella Martinez, the domestic worker who became an advocate, a leader, and a testament to the indomitable human spirit.